Now you should, there we go, the obligatory little notice to tell you are now being recorded as predetermined. We've discussed this a few times, and we've worked on the basis now that because we've already told you, well, we don't have to get any further consent. So we just take it.
My laughter is consent.
Yeah, exactly. So for those of you who are new to the channel, welcome to the Data Protection Diaries. This is our pub chat podcast series. The intention of this series is to speak to and get to know people who work in the privacy and security industry, and just generally have a bit of a chat as if you were in the pub. Today we are joined by probably one of my favourite data protection practitioners, and I'll go into why he's my favourite later on. Steve Wright. Steve Wright runs a consultancy called Privacy Culture, but he has an amazing background in privacy and security, and has had some fascinating roles. And I'm talking about you rather than talking to you, which is interesting. You are one of the most experienced and probably one of the most interesting people that work in this sector. So to get started, do you want to give us a bit of a background as to who Steve Wright is and where Steve Wright comes from?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you, Richard, for inviting me. It's always good to talk with you. I share a similar affection and respect. So it's always good when two like-minded people get together. My only regret is we don't have a pint in our hands, but perhaps soon, with the current openings. And in fact, I've just this morning booked my local pub in my village that opens this Friday, and I've booked for Friday afternoon as part of the new signing in process. So I've booked a table for drinking on Friday afternoon. To answer your question, I think I'll explain it in the way I often do. I see my career as being seasons. And the first season, when I was a mere grad, I had ideas about being a underwriter for a large risk insurance company in the city. And so I went straight into a scheme where they started moving you around different departments, so you could become a really good risk underwriter. And along that journey, I picked up some interesting projects, which was transferring the mainframe green screens to these new whizzy Windows-based machines. And I kind of took an interest in that, having used a dot matrix printer at college, and and floppy disks to save all my work on. This great new GUI interface where you could click and you didn't have to use the tab key to navigate your way around was interesting for me, and that began my career, or interest, shall we say, in this whole tech side of the world, the business world. But from there, I then went to work quite quickly after that for a tech company. And the great thing about that was the first job that the then director gave me was, Steve, would you mind looking at our security? And I foolishly said, or naively said at the time, well, what's the problem? We've got guys on the doors. The security guard. And that there, beginning my kind of career in the whole security side of things. And I soon quickly understood the vastness of vulnerabilities, of security vulnerabilities, not just the physical, but certainly the online and the data. And in fact, the data center where I used to work from here in Kent was one of the first data centers to have a break-in professional job for its chips. and those were in the giddy days when chips were worth more than gold. And so those physical security cards didn't work. they still broke in and managed to go away. We never found out whether they were in on the job. But there you go. So, I then stayed in the sort of security tech side for that next phase or season in my life. And I found that really interesting because I was working for a couple of solution providers and then moved over to PWC. And it's there where I then started to get involved with privacy. Just by the very nature, I started working on a particular client site. Back then PWC had nearly, I think it was about 40-50% of the FTSE 100 clients. And so I was just hopping from big client to big client, doing some really interesting work on the back of an incident or on the back of an audit that they had done, discovered some vulnerabilities or some issues. And I started increasingly working with our general counsel and our legal services at PwC. And they dragged me in on a project to do some data mapping and data analysis. And that was really where I understood working on secondment at the client's sites. I was actually working directly for what was essentially the CPO, but back then wasn't called the CPO. They were just someone in legal that had been given the responsibility for looking at all the sort of legal side of the data and the privacy side. And that then led to a job at Deloitte, working in their privacy and security practice. And from there, I then got my first, if you like, proper role as a CPO working for Unilever. And that was a fantastic job, really interesting. I mean, Unilever is a global company, as you know, Richard. And I did that for a few years, and I can describe that really as a bit of an ambassador's role, because back then we didn't have GDPR. We knew it was sort of being talked about, but we didn't have it. So we had to create the framework, and then I had to go and propagate the message globally about why we should have a common standard across all the operating companies. And some countries were more receptive than others, I would say, but what it did do is it got me out of the UK for about 3.5 years, and I barely saw my kids. And then I knew GDPR was coming by then, and I got a tap on the shoulder for a role at John Lewis, went to get interviewed by the general counsel and the CFO, and they liked me and I liked them, and I liked the fact that I was going to be given complete carte blanche to design, create, implement, and bring this very interesting organization. And every retailer knows that John Lewis is institutionally a very old, very political, oil tanker that does not move fast or fast enough. And obviously now it's going to have to change, like every retailer, quite rapidly. But when I joined, fortunately, the business, the e-commerce business, was 4.5 billion already. It's now more than that. And they still had their relationship with Ocado and things like that. But it was a great place to really implement GDPR, because we had 85,000 staff, 6 call centers, 400 shops. It was hard work, but it was worth it in the end. And then towards the end of that, I always had harbored ambitions to start my own thing and do my own thing. And one thing I had noticed over the years was that the common denominator, or the missing piece, if you like, the gap, was the culture. Each organisation that I'd worked with whilst I was at PwC and Deloitte, and then at Unilever and John Lewis, was culturally different from where it's just where it come from, its mindset, its behaviours of its people. So you had to tailor messaging and tailor training and basically go for different audiences. So privacy culture I wanted to create, and then As you know, I got as soon as I'd started, I got a gig at the Bank of England, and that was fantastic. That was just over 6 months, but it was really fun, really hard, and incredibly different culture to anything I'd ever witnessed in my entire career. And here we are today, really. And so sort of finished up at the bank last summer, and started working for a variety of really fantastic CPOs and data protection officers like you, supporting them in different ways, but predominantly around the sort of training, awareness and culture. So that was it. And those 3 flavors that I talked about, those seasons, if you like, was first risk, then I would say sort of technology, then security, and now latterly privacy. So those are the 4 seasons of my life so far, and I'm hoping the privacy one will see me out, to I return to the soil.
You want to retire in this one. You don't want to change.
yeah. I want to be a silver surfer. I've heard about them. I want to be a silver surfer.
So the thing that I've always enjoyed, because for me, I know I sort of alluded to at the beginning that I've always been a fan of yours, and that came from, so when you were at Unilever was where I first met you or heard of you or came into contact with you. I think for a lot of people that watch this podcast series, it's all been about GDPR, and everything's quite new and quite fresh, and you've got conferences everywhere, and you've got lots of people talking, and you've got things like this. Whereas 8-9 years ago, that just didn't exist. There was a couple of legalistic conferences. There was a few things. There was a lot of old men in tweed suits, and that had been around and knew everything about, the original 82 Act and the 98 Act, but were very public sector. And there wasn't, I don't know, for somebody coming into it at the point where I was, there wasn't really anybody to talk to. There wasn't really anybody to focus on. And I remember going to, it was a practical law conference, which is again is a big legal conference. And you were speaking at the practical law conference, and you were the first person I'd seen in the sector that wore a suit that wasn't grey or brown, blue 3-piece suit. Like, you had enthusiasm, you had vibrancy. The work that was done at Unilever, I mean, you can even see on your background board the colours, the engagement, the way that you create things, and you kind of brought things to life. And from what I've seen, you've always had that risk and strategy mindset to privacy, which obviously helped when you were in Unilever. Do you feel that the work that you're doing in creating that culture, that the world is more susceptible to the idea of a risk-based culture in terms of privacy, rather than just treating it as an out-and-out legal requirement? Do people start to engage with it more now?
Yeah, I think, 2 comments. First of all, thank you. I don't remember that conference, but I do know that on the suit issue, one of the funniest things, one of the partners said to me, it's very, very, you do your time in each grading at the Big Four. And I'm told, I've got some good friends at some of the Magic Circle as well, and I'm told it's similar, right? So I got to director, and then the giant leap is to partner, because you're an equity partner and you get to share of the spoils, if you like. Although I've never seen a poor partner, although I've seen partners come and go quite quickly. I couldn't make the leap from director to partner, and that was one because probably I was a little bit different, and I didn't quite fit the bill, and 2 because as a partner pointed out to me one day, Steve, you've got the wrong colour shoes.
Brown shoes.
And because I used to wear a blue suit with brown shoes, right? And I said, what are you talking about? And he just gave me that knowing look, which was, you'd never understand because you've got the wrong color shoes. So I kind of figured that I'll probably never make partner at one of these big firms. And I think, to your latter point, for me, I've always tried to, look at things differently. I've always tried to obviously understand the problem, but then just try and think, from a total 360 point of view, go almost circumvent around the circumference of the problem, so that you see it from different angles and you can have a better understanding. And that sort of represented its way in trying to draw pictorially what the problem was and what the solution could be, and obviously come up with options. And let's be honest, when I joined PWC, they would write a PowerPoint presentation pack for a proposal, and up until that time, there'd been very few illustrations in a very dull Word document that, you would be writing policy essentially, or, you would be doing risks in Excel spreadsheet and kind of trying to model it. Your best friend was a calculator as opposed to trying to pictorially do it. And I think that PwC was good for me in that respect, because it helped me to express a lot of, a lot of those things that then other people could relate to. And one of the most interesting ones was my cow, as you can see, because it makes me smile. And the reason I have that up there is because when I went to the Waitrose stores, obviously above the counters, the meat counters, I don't know if they still have them, but they used to show a cow with the cuts of beef so that you knew what you were buying into. And I thought, well, what better way to reach the board of Waitrose than shove a cow up and say, look, we've got... And that was where the cow came about, me visiting one of our Waitrose and thinking, that's it, that's how I'm going to illustrate GDPR to these people, and of course they did get it. And so the GDPR became synonymous as I was doing the circuit, if you like, with my cow. And people found it very funny, up until I then got pointed out that there was a lot of vegans in the audience. And perhaps it wasn't the right illustration. So I do think the color is, we live in such a rich, vibrant, colorful world, and so if you can capture that and represent that somehow, to help people understand the story, and I think that's great. It's like, I admire these children's illustrators who read a story and then create images. I think that's amazing. And film producers and people like that, all these creatives and artists and musicians, if you like. It's quite amazing.
I like the idea that something can be articulated in a different way. Like, it doesn't have to be the written word. I can never get that out. My children will be like, draw me a dinosaur, and I'm like, that's not a dinosaur, Dad. I'm like, I don't.
It's a dog.
It's a dog. Yeah, it's a stick man. It look like a dinosaur. But it is that kind of that mindset, and I think that, for me, that kind of mindset is rare in this industry. Like, we've talked on previous episodes of this podcast about, you have sort of three types of people that do this role, or three types of people in these kind of businesses. And you've got your out and out lawyers, so your legalists, lawyers by trade who do data protection and do by the book, black and white. This is what it says, what's defensible. You have your sort of practitioners, so your people in the middle, a bit like myself, who aren't necessarily legalistically trained but can understand the regulation but look at ways to implement it. And then you have your sort of your strategists, your deeper thinkers, the people that are not just looking for what needs to be done today, but what needs to be done for the future to create a better organization and to use data in a better way. Now, I'd put you in the strategist area because I think for me, you've always had that sort of broader viewpoint. Do you see yourself as a strategist? Do you see yourself as a practitioner? Do you think it matters? Does it make a difference?
Well, I don't know, because I'm quite happy with your analysis. That is probably quite accurate. I think the thing is, if there's a place for everybody, isn't there? Right. If I think about the teams that I've built, and I dare say that all my success, I have to say, is built by the people around me. I couldn't have achieved, half, a fraction of what I managed to achieve if it wasn't for the teams around me. I suppose the thing about that is it's quite hard to find the right person that's going to fit the skills or the deficiencies that you have as an individual. And that's sort of the self-reflective. Yeah, I remember doing years ago Myers-Briggs and various different what are you and where do you fit on
red, yellow, green, blue.
Yeah, exactly. And I always knew that I wasn't the aggressive type. I was much more collaborative, and I prefer to do things in a team. And it's so. What I mean by that is, I think that's bode well for me, because over the years I've pulled together really good individuals who have got very good skill sets. Like I've got two lovely lawyers that work with me, and both of them do stuff I cannot do, which is that absolute attention to one sentence for hours and making sure I just can't do it. I just cannot do it. I read a lot, but I have to enjoy what I'm reading, because otherwise my attention will be off. So I think it's your example is probably not. Yeah, probably right. I think the wider question for me is about always, how can we do this better? That's always in the back of my mind. It's always plays on my mind. I'm just trying to think. So I've got a post-it note on my screen here, and it just says white paper, data ethics framework. So I want to write a data ethics framework because I haven't started that research, but that to me is something that I now want to start working towards. So it gives me a little bit of a goal on top of everything else I'm doing. But I'll start to formulate that in my head, and then what does that look like? And then I'll start doing the research about what's out there, and and then I'll start to pull something together, and without a doubt it'll have a picture.
There's nothing wrong with pictures. Everything needs pictures.
Yeah.
So, one of the other things I wanted to pick your brain on specifically, because obviously we talked at the beginning of the call, or the beginning of the chat, that a huge part of what you do now is culture. So encouraging organisations to have that mindset. You can have the tools, you can have the conceptual idea, but if you haven't got a culture that encourages privacy, you're going to come up against challenges. There's a lot of talk in the press and in the media and on LinkedIn and in other places that the culture is going to change just for everyone. We're going to move away from being in an office. We're going to be working from home for more. We're going to have this new normal, and that's going to bring its own challenges. Onboarding is going to be hard.
Yeah.
We have a Slack group where we load of DPAs, and we're people talking about training, like how do you do training? Like you can't necessarily do it face to face. Is e-learning still going to work? Have you seen a change in the approach that your clients want to take now? Are they starting to think about how their business is going to move and how you can still bring that culture on? Or do you think people are still stuck in the mindset that actually doing what we do is enough?
No, I definitely sense change. Having these few months locked at home. I mean, I've always worked from home. I'm very fortunate to have a studio office which is separate from my building, so I get the luxury of closing the doors on my kids who are killing each other or screaming at mum because they've got some homework or some coursework. So at least two of them are there, and one of them's out of school today. It's her particular day that she goes to school, and the two that are there are just exhausting. So they just like drain you. So what's my point is that what I've observed is that of all of the data protection officers that I know, and I do know, I am very fortunate, I know an awful lot of them, resounding, and in fact I had a conversation with one of them earlier, there's a resounding sense of change. Now that's obvious, right, because of the circumstances. But what is less obvious is the fact that all of those CPOs, DPOs and CISOs are now having to think differently about how they would have, previously. I'll give you an example. I've got two clients which, we were going to roll out the program of training in March, globally, several different markets, and it all got put on hold because of COVID. And now what's happened, and that's the same with another client I've got, they're now coming back to me and saying, right, actually, we think now the training, the awareness, the communication piece is now even more important. So I'm actually getting an uptick in the level of engagement from both existing and new or potential clients. And I think that's brought on by the fact that the risks have gone through the roof in terms of we're now got private information being shared inadvertently with our corporate life, and our home life is now completely one. The amount of conversations I have with even my dog jumping up or kids running in front of jumping on their mum, when you're halfway through a conference call. I mean, it's just hilarious. But what that does is it makes us all much more tolerant to the fact that actually, of course you were a privacy officer, but of course you were a mother first, or you're a father, and you've got other responsibilities. So I think there's this sort of, I don't want to pinch the word, but there's this sort of mindfulness or cognitive sort of, wow, actually, these people are human. They're trying to balance their day jobs with the normal demands of now homeschooling, and going to Sainsbury's becomes a crusade, and all of those normal things have been thrown upside down with this pandemic. And we now know, if you like, to your point, Richard, that the new norm is going to be this. It's not going to go away until we've all had vaccinations, assuming that they're successful. The early part of next year before we'll see any vaccinations, if we're lucky. So we're going to have to treat, like the fact I've booked the pub for Friday. And I'm giving names, addresses. I'm thinking, hang on a minute. I tell a lie, I didn't give addresses, but I'm now sharing this information. And what's the most significant change I've seen personally, because I've got a 17, 14 and 11-year-old, is the track and trace has raised the dinner table conversation about what these organizations are doing with our data, and as you know, because we've had side conversations about the whole real-time bidding using our cookie data, without our consent is a bit of a hobby horse for me. But the the whole ad tech bit. So I really think that my 17-year-old is now a conspiracy theorist. I'm getting dead paranoid. And before, I could not get that kid to actually take an iota of interest in anything I did. But now suddenly it's like, well, hang on a minute, I'm not sure I want to share my data. I'm like, oh, that's interesting, son. So there is going to be this increasing demand for more understanding and more explanation about what you can and can't do. A bit like COVID, about the new trace and track, and I'm just going to write some guidance for my local schools, which I'm involved with, been a governor for many years, and there's a lack of information about it. So I've got to go out and then I've got to apply my sort of DPO experience and logic to what data we need to capture and when and where. And so, what's going to be for sure, and these questions have already started to come through, is can I do that with the data? Am I allowed to how long do I keep it for? And all that kind of good stuff that you and I, teach about and help our clients, I think is going to increase. I think that, if anything, COVID has increased the dilemma or the ethical debate about privacy. What are we entitled to and what should we share and those sorts of things. So I think, you're right. In the long and short of it is change is afoot, and I think it's for the better.
I think it amazed me. I went to the pub. So this is Monday, so I went to the pub yesterday, just to drop in.
Yeah.
Kids have been out playing.
The thrill of going in a pub. I haven't been in one, so I'm so excited about Friday.
Yeah. There's a little playground out the back, and it was this bizarre situation where there was a privacy notice in my pub, and people are reading it, and you think, well, nobody even reads the ones on the website, but there's like a little information sheet next to the notebook where you had to just write your name and telephone number.
Wow. And
it was interesting. The conversations that I'd seen previously, and there's a lot of talk about how pubs and restaurants are going to do this, and and I was talking to my parents about it, and they're like, it's a disgrace. I don't want to tell them who I am. If I want to book a table, I want to book a table. I said, but what did you do when you used to book a table? So I'd ring the restaurant and I'd give them my name and my telephone number. What are you going to do? And what are you going to do when you book a table now?
Yeah.
Ring them up and give them my name and my telephone number.
Exactly.
I think we live in a world where the media creates this sort of negative connotation to everything and tries to stir it up and make it more than necessarily it is. But I think you're right that at least it has brought that conversation home, and now people that didn't want to talk about it are excited about it. Like my 7-year-old daughter Millie is extremely excited that one of our next guests on here is going to be a guy called Mike Jones, who used to be a hacker for Anonymous. So he used to be part of the Anonymous network. Cool. And she's obsessed with Anonymous. I'm like, you're 7 years old, and you're obsessed with hackers and what they do and why they do it.
Great.
And you just think, I've never lived in a world where actually that conversation is so fluid and is so free and is so easy.
That reminds me, because growing up, Kevin Mitnick was my, he was the guy that the FBI finally caught and turned because he was so clever in his online fraud schemes and technology hacks that basically they turned him. And so he was not quite 7 years old. That's wonderful, but a bit older, maybe 27 when I first read about him. And then I got to meet him one day, which was just fantastic, like childhood.
Childhood hero.
Yeah, childhood hero, a hacker. It's a bit worrying though, isn't it?
I think everything's just so much more accessible now, though.
Yeah.
It used to be. I remember the biggest thing I ever remember from a hacker case. I can't remember the guy's name. Was the guy they were trying to extradite back to the US? He'd hacked into NASA and a few other things. But they spent like 10 years trying to get him extradited to the US. And in the end, it got overturned because they were saying he was autistic and he didn't fully understand the implications of what he was doing.
Yeah.
And that was like, nobody knew what. I remember the film Hackers, which had Angelina Jolie and somebody else, and they're going around on rollerblades, and they've all got dreadlocks and massive baggy like cyber.
They were all cool, weren't they?
yeah, like cyber raving trousers that we used to go raving in at the time, and it was never mainstream. It never, that conversation never existed, and now it's everywhere you go. It's in your local pub. So when you go to the pub on Friday, like you said, you booked a table for drinking. So do you have to book a drinking table and a food table?
No, they encourage you to eat. so of course, you can take. When I spoke to them, they said, well, you've got access to our menu, and so and I think, I don't know because the guidance keeps changing, but. We might have a plate of cheesy chips. Who knows? Stranger things have happened after 3 or 4 pints. I think, but the nice thing about that is actually it's in a pub garden, so it'll be outdoors, which will be safer. But that will actually be with some of the team.
Oh, nice.
So, and I haven't seen these people. So they're coming down on the train, so that we can, have a kind of meet and greet over a beer, which was such a easy thing to do, back in February. You'd finish at a client site and you'd say, oh, do you want to meet at so and so, and you'd meet at I don't know, wherever. On the Thames or something, over, and that's all been taken away from us, and so that just the thrill of being able to drink in a pub garden is something to look forward to for Friday. But you're right, the whole conversation piece now with our young is where it should be, which is really good, because and I can tell the contrast, because only, I would say, even 18 months ago with my eldest, he said I plainly did not care what happened to his data. But wasn't interested. Just, even though, dad's into this and dad's, I don't care, dad. I just don't care. Now he cares. Now he's dead paranoid. And he's coming up to me with conspiracy theories. Coming of age,
It's funny because there's now cybersecurity apprenticeships.
I know.
There's information rights degrees. None of this stuff used to exist, and all of a sudden it's appeared.
But I remember 98 and the Data Protection Act coming into force. And I remember there was a guy I met, and I can't remember who he is, but I met him, and I said, what's your role? And he said, I'm responsible for the Data Protection Act. And I was like, how boring. How boring is that? And he said, no, it's really interesting, actually. No, it's not. I'm thinking about hackers. You're thinking about boring law. I just wished I'd said to him at the time it would never catch on,
Yeah, because he could ring you up now and say.
Yeah, it would have been sort of how anyway. So it's I don't know. It's definitely a changing place, and I think the other debates that also have kind of taken a bit of a back foot. Maybe they haven't in certain circles, but certainly in the mainstream, most of the conversations I'm having with privacy people is around things more operational that are deficient, like the privacy impact assessment, like, you know, ROPAs not being properly completed, DSARs, you know, falling in between the cracks, those sorts of things, and of course training. So those things I think are still prevalent. And the other thing that I've noticed in terms of change is that, like you, I have my weekly chat show thing, and for the first time, one of the CISOs that I've known for a very long time came on the show and was, you know, asking questions, and I couldn't believe he was. I was so pleased to hear him, and that he'd taken his time out. And I think, you know, there's been this, certainly in the LinkedIn circle, there's been this kind of like, is the role being merged? And then we've got the Belgium case where they tried to merge it with risk and audit, which is a conflict of interest. You know, there's talk of redundancies, and I haven't seen that. The conversations I've been having, and they've been plentiful, are no, we're looking to hire people. Actually, we're looking to bolster. This person's moving on to this company because they've got as far as they can go in their current role, and, you know, and I'm welcome. So I'm going to be looking for someone. The challenge for the DPO CPO community is, how do they do that without their, you know, headcount or budget? That's the challenge. So I think, you know, you're being asked to do more for less, not necessarily to cut people. Now, I'm sure there are circumstances where whole businesses, especially in the retail sector, or any sector that's been deeply affected by COVID, where they will naturally be letting people go. You know, you know, and that could be hundreds, could be tens, could be thousands, and you know, it's scary that the, you know, the numbers of unemployed from 1.4 in February to 4.2 they're predicting. That's a staggering amount of unemployment, and of course, every industry sector. It doesn't matter what you were. If you were an accountant working, you know, finance, if you're in HR, it doesn't matter. Everyone's going to be affected. So it's we're no different. But what I'm seeing is actually more pressure on the DPO CPO community to do more with less, and of course zero budgeting. So there's definitely not going to be an increase. If anything, there's going to be a decrease. And of course, the one thing that gets decreased is your travel budget. That's okay. That's a big tick because no one's going anywhere. But then, of course, training is often one of those, and affiliations, you know, associations. So you might have to choose carefully about which society you belong to, or which, you know, clubs you want to remain involved with. So I think, you know, but you and I are both old enough to know that these things are called recessions. You know, and a bit like life, you know, you have your ups and downs, and right now we're in a very deep down. But hopefully it will bounce back up, and our businesses, our respective businesses, can survive that, and our clients can survive that, and you know, we'll be stronger through it, because you learn, you know, out of every recession. I remember the 90s recession, and then and then we had a blip in 88. And then blip in 88, then the 90s, and then after Y2K, which all my mates were making loads of money on, running around charging stupid day rates for just in case the lift stopped working. So yeah, exactly, it was hilarious. But then we had the dot-com bust, you know, the bubble popped, and then, you know, 2008, and you know, Lehman Brothers was pretty awful. I was at PWC at the time, you know, at the time nobody thought anything would return to the norm. So it will get better. It's just how long it takes to get better. And that's, you and I are both optimists. So we're half full type people, aren't we? So we tend to look at. Anyway, I'm waffling.
No, that's what we're here for. This is like, it's nice to have just a general. But the reason we started doing this, I actually stole this from Barry Malt, because he'd done it for an IRMS conference, and the idea was that him and his colleague Andrew would just have a chat like they were in the pub.
Okay.
So they actually went to the pub before their session to talk about what they were going to talk about, and I think they came back 2.5 pints deep and hadn't actually worked out what it was they were going to talk about. So
exactly.
Just waffled on.
Just waffled.
Yeah. I think it's hard because everybody talks about this new normal, and everyone's trying to see what the world might be like. But you're right. Everything's going to be different. The way we communicate is going to be different. The way we engage with teams is going to be different. The way we engage with CISOs, DPOs, finance directors, compliance teams is going to be different. And the challenge now is, especially for you, is creating that culture. And how do you still encourage that kind of way of working to exist when you're losing that human interaction? You're using that empathy, that ability to be in front of somebody and see their body language and have the small chat. It's a shame because Teams is good, and you have your conversation, but you used to have a meeting and then you stand outside your meeting and just catch up for 5-10 minutes, whereas now it's like, oh, meeting's finished, bye. And I think it's going to be an interesting one, but I think you're right. I don't think it's going to last forever. It's just hold on. Yeah, hold on to your seat. Keep smiling. That's it. Go, yeah. Keep calm and carry on, I think, isn't it? Be British. Yes, exactly. Stiff up with it and get drunk at the weekends. Yeah. So nothing changes. We just do it in our own homes. I've done a few virtual, drinks parties, which is funny. The problem with that is, of course, you can't have side conversations. No. If we were in a part of a group, it's very difficult to say, oh, did you hear about what happened to so-and-so? You can't do that. You have to have one-to-ones. It's not one-to-many. It's just, it doesn't really work. It's hard. We did do a few Zoom games evenings, which was just a nightmare. Basically, you got about 20 pictures on the screen, and you're like, everyone's trying to talk at once, and it was hard work. I mean, but I did get drunk, so. and the home measures as well, so you don't really know what you're drinking because you're just free pouring it in, and then. It's true actually. Yeah, large halves of. Yeah. Awesome. Right, now I understand you're getting your haircut this afternoon. Yes, I'm very excited by that. Full PPE, but I'm so this is my wife's hairdresser, and so I've got to go, with my mask on, and I've got to chlorinate myself before I go in and after. So yeah, I'm actually quite excited because I hacked my hair myself because my wife refused to cut my hair. So I literally I stood in the mirror and just started hacking where I thought. And as it transpires, it's all right, actually, because I haven't got that much hair. So it wasn't really, I'm losing it. So it wasn't a big thing, but I had clumps that were coming out at different angles. So I had to cut it back a bit. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that, actually. And but these things are, hard, as you say. I think the interaction between the different departments is going to be the hardest thing. I would this year, let's kind of almost not write it off, but
certainly in terms of collaboration, interaction between different people, because you learn from others, won't be easy. So if I was a graduate in a work environment, I might quite like the fact that I can get up at 5 to 9 and be online, but you can't learn. It's very hard to learn from people's you can't the interaction. How we learn is from others, so it's really important to see modeled behavior and to talk to people and listen to people's just general conversations, or overhear those conversations. It's how we are socially integrate, because we hear these things and we learn from them and we formulate our own decisions or opinions, and that's going to be incredibly hard. So I think for the, if I was a graduate, if I was 20 odd now working in a big organization, I'd feel very isolated. Actually, I'd feel quite low, because that interaction is so important. That coffee moments, those water cooler moments are so important as part of our social and climbing the ladder to learn. If I think about the places, especially like PWC, it's all about the network. It was all about how you networked with which partners, directors, senior managers, business units, integrating with other business units. So it's about collaboration, and that's incredibly hard to do when it's just one-to-one like this.
Yeah.
So
it's true.
I feel
Relationship building is.
Yeah, no, I hope and pray that we just get past this, or we get onto a vaccination and we can all basically get back to work and get back to working together in teams and groups.
Yeah, it'd be nice. Be nice to see some humans again.
It certainly would.
Live actual physical humans rather than just screen ones. But time will tell. Wow. Steve Wright, Privacy Culture.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time. It was awesome talking to you.
Thank you for having me. It's been lovely talking to you. We always have good chats. Like I said, normally over a beer, but it's a bit early. Although it's happy hour somewhere.
It's always happy hour somewhere.
Yeah, but thank you, Richard. It's great, and I wish you all the best for you, your family, and your business. And I hope everything still stays on plan. Let's keep talking. Keep reminding each other, encouraging each other, and get out there. Yeah, do our best. Do our stuff.
Do our bits. Do our bits for the world.
Exactly.
We'll carry on the good fight.
Yeah.
Cool. Steve Wright. We'll put your details down below, by the way. So the website for Privacy Culture will be down below. So make sure you go and check that out. And we'll put Steve's LinkedIn profile down there as well. So if you want to go and check him out on LinkedIn, make sure you go and have a look at that. But from us at the Data Protection Diaries, that's it for today. We hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like, subscribe, comment down below, all the usual things. And we look forward to seeing you soon.